Chapter 165. After a portion of the officials left for Nanjing to follow Zhong, the remaining officials in the capital were all restored to their original positions. Hu Xiangning was also restored to his position as the guardian of the embroidered uniform guard. In addition, Yang Chendong was still the commander of the embroidered uniform guard, so it was only natural that he would send some embroidered uniform guards to help out. Not only that, but Yang Chendong also ordered that any embroidered uniform guard who came to help out would be rewarded with 100 taels of silver. For a time, the embroidered uniform guard fought amongst themselves for this mission. Those who were able to come here could be considered lucky. When the time came, the carriage from the Yang clan arrived in front of the Hu estate. Yang Chendong, dressed in a white suit, stepped out of the spacious carriage. The wedding ceremony had officially begun. The Immortal Abode's band was already waiting for Yang Chendong to arrive. The music began to play, and could be faintly heard from several streets away. Hu Yan, who was dressed like a fairy in a white wedding dress, walked up to Yang Chendong, accompanied by Qiao Yin, Madame Snow, and the bride, who were also wearing a wedding dress and looked very beautiful. Hu Yan's blushing face perfectly explained what it meant to put the moon and flowers to shame. What was different from the other women was that there were two children who were only 5 or 6 years old standing behind Hu Yan, a boy and a girl who looked like a golden couple. They each pulled up a corner of the white wedding dress so that the long, fluttering wedding dress would not fall to the ground, but also showed her magnanimity. There was no red veil. This was Yang Chendong's idea. After reporting this to the Hu clan, Yang Chendong received their support. Thus, Yang Chendong took the bride, Hu Yan, who could walk on her own, to the Hu clan's main hall. Here, they knelt down and kowtowed to Hu Xiangning and his wife. The completion of this step was completely recorded by the camera. From the footage, it could be seen that Hu Xiangning and Madame Shui's faces were extremely pale. It was clear that they were also frightened by the equipment that could record their figures. After paying his respects to the elders, Yang Chendong carried Hu Yan out of the Hu estate. Along the way, the courtyard was filled with all kinds of gifts that Yang Chendong had given to the Hu clan. There was no need to introduce the types of items. In short, someone had calculated the total value of these items after the event. The total value of these items was over 1 million taels of silver. Just this amount alone was enough to shock countless people. This was one of the most beautiful stories in the capital, because not even the emperor would be willing to part with so many good things. From this matter, it could also be seen that Yang Chendong valued Hu Yan. The inside and outside of the Immortal Abode were already packed with people. In order to congratulate the patriarch on his wedding today, all the diners will have a 50% discount. Even the commoners who didn't come to the Immortal Abode to spend money could still enjoy the delicacies they had prepared. The premise was that the whole family had to come together. At the very least, the couple had to bring a child and bring their own lunch boxes. At that time, all the children who came would receive a delicious little pastry. The news had been released 3 days ago. By morning, the entire street in front of the Immortal Abode was packed with people. As a result, the embroidered uniform guards who were responsible for the security of the area were given a lot more work to do. Fortunately, the people who came to receive the delicacies and pastries were all very well behaved. Some entered and some left, so there wasn't much panic. After leaving the Hu estate, the bridegroom, Yang Chendong, personally drove the carriage. Hu Yan, Qiao Yin, Madame Shui, and Madame Xiang were seated inside. Yang Chendong, who was driving the carriage, sang the bridal sedan in fear. Tiger's Mane and the others, who had long since learned how to sing, sang along loudly. When the sun comes out, I climb the mountain. When I reach the peak, I want to sing. My song floats to my little sister. When she hears my song, she smiles. Yang Chendong's cheerful voice rang out. Sitting in the spacious and comfortable carriage, Hu Yan and the other girls were filled with happiness. As they looked at the brightly colored balloons around the carriage, their faces were brimming with happiness. The carriage passed through the streets of the Immortal Abode. Along the way, one new song after another could be heard. All of them were joyous songs that suited the occasion, and the people who had come along to watch the show all cheered with joy. As they passed through the streets of the immortal abode and saw the crowded streets, Yuan and the other girls smiled at each other. This was the young master doing a good deed, as well as accumulating good karma. Although he had to spend some money to do so, in the eyes of the girls, the significance of this action was far more profound. The carriage finally left the capital, and under the protection of the embroidered uniform guards, it headed for the Yang clan manor. At this time, there were all sorts of carriages and bridal sedan chairs waiting outside the Yang clan manor. Many officials of the court were waiting here for the bridegroom to arrive. He had only been in the capital for a little more than a year, less than 2 years. However, young Chendong had used his own efforts to prove his strength. With money and power, who wouldn't give him this little bit of face? And this wasn't even mentioning the fact that he was marrying the granddaughter of the Minister of Rights, Hu Shao. Under the witness of many honored guests, Yang Chendong took Yuan's arm and led her to the main hall of the Yang clan manor, where the two principals were already seated. Yang Chendong and his wife were no longer present, so the ones presiding over Yang Chendong's wedding were his big brother Yang Gong and big sister Yang Fei. The entire Yang clan had come to Yang Chendong's wedding, and even his second brother Yang Rang was in the crowd. However, it was clear that his complexion was rather unsightly. He had originally believed that with his sixth brother dead, he, as the second brother, would be able to openly take over the family property. He hadn't expected that Yang Chendong would return, and in such a domineering manner, and even be conferred the title of Valiant Marquis. The affairs of the world were truly unpredictable, and Yang Rang had lost a great deal of face. For Yang Chendong's wedding, he had invited all the members of the Yang clan, including all the important ministers in the capital, but his second brother didn't send anything. This had already proved Yang Chendong's attitude. Even so, Yang Rang still came by himself. He knew that this might be an opportunity to change the relationship between himself and his sixth brother. In the main hall, Yang Gong was on the left and Yang Chendong was on the right, accepting the kneeling ceremony of Hu Yanxing, his new daughter-in-law. Under the insistence of Yang Chendong, they only completed the first bow to heaven and earth, and the second bow to the parents. As for the third step of entering the bridal chamber, it was cancelled. According to Yang Chendong, women didn't just stay at home to take care of their husbands and children. They could also do many other things that they liked to do. This was also called the liberation of women. Since it was liberation, then he would start with his wife. After communicating with Hu Yan in advance, and knowing that she didn't want to enter the bridal chamber so early and wait for a long time, he agreed to her request and allowed her to change into a beautiful qipao. Then, she reappeared in front of everyone and toasted the guests with him. When the ceremony reached this point, it was time for the wedding banquet to begin. For the important ministers, the banquet was also a part of their work. There were many things that were difficult to say and difficult to do, but they were often easily done with the passing of a cup. Yang Chendong's wedding gave everyone an opportunity to interact. For a moment, the ministers came and went, and it was very lively. However, this liveliness reached a climax when the bride, Hu Yan, and the 3 other women, changed into decent qipaos and appeared. Yang Chendong announced in front of everyone that today was not only the day he married Hu Yan, but also the day he took Qiao Yin, Lady Shui, and Lady Xiang as his concubines. After listening to Yang Chendong's announcement, the 3 women, who were completely unaware before, were so excited that their faces turned red. They originally thought that they were very happy to be able to follow Dong Shui. With their status, they didn't dare to ask for anything. However, they didn't expect that happiness would come to them so quickly and so suddenly. In response, Hu Yan looked at them with a smile. She wasn't surprised at all. Obviously, she already knew about this news and must have agreed. Otherwise, Yang Chendong wouldn't do such a thing in public. He was marrying his wife and concubines on the same day. Although this kind of thing had happened before, most of the protagonists who did it were extremely desolate. However, no matter how one looked at it, Yang Chendong wasn't someone who was muddle-headed. At this point, the general public thought that it was normal for emperors to have many wives and concubines. They also thought that it was natural and believed that China's ancient people practiced polygamy. However, this wasn't the case. Many modern people learned about ancient China through media such as movies, or web novels. At the same time, they often defined the social environment and culture of that era through the interpretation of the drama. Therefore, when the dramas performed were like the hotly discussed palace dramas such as Zhenhuan Zhuan, Rui Zhuan, Yanxi Strategy, and Do You Know It?, the general public would easily take the situation of the emperor and his ministers having many wives and concubines as a matter of course, and believe that the ancient Chinese people practiced polygamy. In fact, what we don't know is that China's marriage model since ancient times was mainly monogamy, and not the stereotypical polygamy and monogamy. The Great Ming Society's Archives No. 163 clearly recorded the punishment for those who violated the law. For ordinary people, if they have a wife but still marry her, they will be flogged 90 times and divorced. If they are over 40 years old and have no children, they will be allowed to marry concubines. Violators will be flogged 40 times. However, the rules weren't absolute. Very few people would take concubines. However, those who took concubines were mainly those with high social status. In other words, the higher the status, the more concubines they would take. Therefore, the imperial family naturally had the most concubines, followed by the important officials and the rich. Commoners rarely had the opportunity to take concubines. Therefore, taking concubines was considered a privilege in China's traditional culture. In the Great Ming Society's Archives No. 57, it clearly stated that taking concubines, as well as the number of concubines, had to be investigated by the Ministry of Rites. The heir and the prince had 4 concubines. The eldest son and the general had 3 concubines. It was true that Yang Chendong was the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage, so taking in 3 concubines wasn't that much of a violation of the rules. However, why didn't he mention it in advance? Since no one knew about it, didn't that mean that this matter wasn't reported to the Ministry of Rites? Chapter 166. With that in mind, the officials all turned to look at the officials from the Ministry of Rites who had come to attend the banquet. Hu Shao was the Minister of Rites, and had been for many years at that. At least a third of the officials in the ministry had been promoted by him or had close ties to him. This time, his granddaughter was getting married. Many officials from the Ministry of Rites had come to show their support. When these officials noticed the gazes of their peers, they all lowered their heads. This proved that Yang Chendong hadn't informed the Ministry of Rites about taking concubines. As if he'd known that everyone would react this way, Yang Chendong smiled at them and said, "I didn't inform the Ministry of Rites beforehand, but I did inform the Minister of Rites. I'll make it up to you later. I only did this because I wanted to give the 3 of them a pleasant surprise." As he spoke, Yang Chendong's gentle gaze fell on Xiao Yin, Madame Shui, and Madame Xiang. His gaze was filled with love. Yang Chendong's actions had indeed given the 3 women a pleasant surprise. As for their reactions, they'd all been recorded by Yang Si. When the officials heard that Yang Chendong had told the Minister of Rites that they'd be reported to the Minister of Rites after the banquet, they all came to a sudden realization. Since that was the case, what did they have to worry about? Besides, what did it have to do with them? In reality, Yang Chendong hadn't told Hu Shao about this. What kind of joke was this? He was marrying someone else's granddaughter, and he was also marrying 3 concubines at the same time. It would be strange if Hu Shao agreed. However, he dared to say this because he was sure that Hu Shao wouldn't expose him. Otherwise, if he got into trouble, Hu Yan would also suffer. When the results were announced, it first drew a lot of discussion, but Yang Chendong easily resolved it. After that, he led the 4 women in a toast to the guests.
Speaking of which, Hu Yan and the others weren't women who only knew how to stay at home. They'd all seen the world, and with Yang Chendong's guidance, they didn't show any signs of fear. Instead, they generously raised their cups and toasted. The atmosphere was quite harmonious. At the same time, the Immortal Abode's band and actors began to sing and dance outside the Yang clan's courtyard. It was a lively scene. Among the guests, Han Ji also received Yang Chendong's wedding invitation. Out of camaraderie, he was pulled over by Shengguan Lv Gui. At this time, when he saw Yang Chendong with the 4 women, his teeth itched with hatred. "Commander, this Yang Chendong is getting bolder and bolder. He didn't even report taking concubines. He dared to act first and report later. This clearly shows that he doesn't put the laws of the great Ming dynasty in his eyes. We cannot allow this to continue." How could Lu Gui not know that Yang Chendong's actions today were a bit out of line? However, he knew that Han Ji's main motive was revenge. It was because his brother-in-law, Wang Go, had been killed by Yang Chendong. That was why he said those words with hatred. But no matter what kind of mentality he had, Han Ji was still one of them. If a superior wanted his subordinates to listen to his orders, he had to empathize with his subordinates. Thus, he nodded and said, "All right, we'll discuss it when we get back. We'll teach him a lesson." "Thank you, Commander, for your help." When Han Ji heard that Lv Gui was finally ready to make a move, he couldn't help but be overjoyed. He quickly raised his arms and used Yang Chendong's wedding wine to toast Lv Gui. The funny thing was that he was also scheming against Yang Chendong. All banquets must come to an end. Although the programs were endless, the guests still left one by one when the sky was almost dark. Among them, there was someone who didn't want to leave. That was the second brother, Yang Rang. At noon, Yang Chendong toasted each table. He had more or less spoken to the guests, but he acted as if he didn't see his second brother. Not only that, even his sisters-in-law treated him like heir. The facts had already shown that Yang Chendong was very angry with him. Since he had come today, he naturally wanted to use this opportunity to perform well and strive to turn hostility into friendship. "Second brother, let's go. Today is not suitable for doing other things." The eldest brother, Yang Gong, walked in front of Yang Rang with a face full of alcohol. The behavior of his second brother a while ago, even he was extremely unhappy after seeing it. But after all, they were still brothers. He couldn't just watch Yang Rang be unlucky. "Big brother." Seeing Yang Gong walk over, Yang Rang showed an amiable and even fawning smile. "Big brother, you must tell little Six that I did it for the good of the Yang family manor. In that case, even if I didn't do it, others would do it. At least if I did, would have given the Yang family a way out, right?" Listening to Yang Rang's sophistry, Yang Gong was very disgusted. He could say so many reasons for doing bad things. He was really shameless to the extreme. "Okay, let's talk about it later. Let's go first." Yang Gong didn't agree. He just wanted to take his second brother away, so that he wouldn't stay and cause trouble and attract the displeasure of his sixth brother. If that happened, it would really spoil the beautiful atmosphere. His eldest brother did not agree to plead for mercy and just wanted to drag him away. How could Yang Rang be willing to comply? His face immediately changed. "All right, since eldest brother doesn't care about our brotherhood and is unwilling to help second brother to plead for mercy, then you can leave by yourself. In short, I will wait here. If little Six doesn't come out, I won't go anywhere today. I want to see if he really doesn't recognize me as his elder brother. If this matter spreads out, who will look good at that time?" Yang Rang shamelessly shook off Yang Gong's arm and then looked at the inner courtyard of the Yang family manor. He looked like he wouldn't leave until he saw the main person. You. He didn't expect his brother to be such a person. Shamelessness is invincible. At this moment, Yang Gong didn't know what to do.
At this moment, a group of people walked out from the inner courtyard. The person in the lead was a woman. It was the eldest sister of the Yang family, Yang Fei. Although they were all from the Yang family, the treatment was obviously different. When Yang Fei walked out, there were 4 brides beside her. Every one of them accompanied her and talked. From time to time, one could see the eldest sister of the Yang family smiling. When he saw his eldest sister walking out, Yang Rang quickly turned around to avoid her. He wasn't afraid of his eldest brother Yang Gong because his eldest brother's ability was mediocre and not worthy of his attention. However, his eldest sister was different. Most of them grew up following behind Yang Fei. When they were young, they were rarely taught a lesson by their eldest sister. As a result, when they grew up, there was still a fear in their hearts. Yang Rang wanted to avoid her, but now that most of the guests had left, there was only a limited number of people left. Yang Fei only needed to sweep her eyes and naturally saw him. When she saw that it was her disappointing second brother who was pacing back and forth, she immediately figured out what was going on. Her face immediately darkened. As the eldest sister, Yang Fei naturally hoped to see the Yang brothers and sisters united. Even if someone did something wrong, if she could give them a chance to forgive, she would be willing to give them the chance. However, as Yang Chendong's second brother, Yang Rang had done something wrong first, and then he wanted to seek justice on the day of the wedding. This was really a bit aggressive. She took large strides and arrived behind Yang Rang, who had just turned around. Yang Gong, who was standing at the side, saw Yang Fei first and quickly called out with a smile, "Eldest sister." When he heard his eldest brother's call, Yang Rang knew that he couldn't avoid it. He could only unwillingly turn around and force out a smile, "Hello, eldest sister." "Oh? You still recognize me as your eldest sister? Since that's the case, then leave immediately. Today is my little brother's wedding day. Do you have to stay here and cause trouble?" Yang Fei said with a cold face and a rude tone. "Ah. Eldest sister, that's not what I meant. I just want to talk to little Six and explain what happened before." How could Yang Rang admit it? He spoke with a face full of excuses. Hearing Yang Rang call Yang Chendong little Six as if he was the boss, Yang Fei was even angrier. She thought about how her little brother had done so many things for the Yang family and even saved Ingzong on the battlefield. That was how dangerous it was to be conferred the title of Marquis. However, there was someone in the family who was dragging her family down. This was truly a chilling action. If she was in Yang Fei's shoes, she would also feel very uncomfortable. With this anger, Yang Fei couldn't be bothered to be polite anymore. She turned to look at Beta Persei and the rest and said, "Go, chase Yang Rang out of the manor. If he doesn't leave, you can beat him until he leaves. I will bear all the consequences. I believe that even if father and mother are watching from the heavens, they won't blame me." Yes. Beta Persei had long found Yang Rang an eyesore. This person was lucky to have been born into the Yang family. If it had been anyone else, who knew how many times they would have died by now. After agreeing, Beta Persei strode forward and lifted Beta Persei off the ground with a thick arm. He didn't seem to use any effort to lift him off the ground. The pitiful Beta Persei was dragged out of the manor like a rabbit, then thrown to the ground. If little Six had ordered someone to do this, he would naturally yell and scream, saying that the other party didn't respect his elder brother. However, since his eldest sister had ordered it, there was nothing he could do. He was the one who had been rude first. Now that he had been thrown out, he was reaping what he sowed. Even though he was still unwilling, Yang Rang had no choice but to stand up with the help of the servants outside the manor. He then entered the palanquin and left the place. In the study of the Yang manor, Yang Chendong was listening to Tiger's Mane's report. The report included the situation in the Immortal abode, as well as the various performances of the officials who had attended the banquet today. The people from the security bureau had disguised themselves as attendants and wandered around the banquet, listening in on everyone's conversations. This was the true record of an official's appearance. At the very least, through this, Yang Chendong could see who had opinions of him and who were dissatisfied with him. "Young master, the embroidered uniform guard just sent someone to deliver this. They said that in order to stabilize the situation in the capital, young master is invited to the embroidered uniform guard's office tomorrow morning to discuss political matters." After Tiger's Mane reported the situation at the banquet, he told Yang Chendong the news he had just received. Chapter 167. Mao, Rabbit. Time was from 5 to 7 o'clock, with 6 o'clock as the time. Letting Yang Chendong go to the meeting so early was obviously not to let the bridegroom have a good night's sleep. It was too obvious that he was deliberately making things difficult for Yang Chendong. In this regard, Yang Chendong just responded with a cold snort, and then ignored it as if he hadn't heard the news. After dealing with the business, Hu Mang tactfully excused himself. Today was the young master's big day, so he had to be tactful to stay far away from the scene. With no one bothering him anymore, Yang Chendong straightened his clothes and walked towards Hu Yan's courtyard in the inner courtyard. Tonight, he was going to perform the Duke of Zhou's rites with her. When he thought of this, his footsteps seemed to quicken. In the bridal chamber, Hu Yan, who had just sent away her elder sister Yang Fei, had returned. After removing her makeup, she changed into a red bridal dress and sat by the bed, waiting. At this time, the room was very quiet, and only the sound of Hu Yan's little heart beating could be heard. Although she had long thought that there would be a day like this, and even looked forward to it. But when she really arrived, she still felt a little nervous. In particular, the servant girl Xiaoqing was nowhere to be found, and no one accompanied her to talk, so the tense atmosphere was even more intense. Creak. The door was pushed open from the outside. Out of instinct, Hu Yan blurted out, "Is it Xiaoqing?" "What? You don't like Lulang, but Xiaoqing?" With a man's magnetic voice, Yang Chendong, who had changed into a loose red robe, stepped in. Seeing that it was Yang Chendong, Hu Yan's heart beat faster. "No, no. What do you mean by no? Do you like Lulang more or Xiaoqing more?" Yang Chendong knew that she was nervous, but he still teased her, which was also a way to relieve her tension. I like Lulang more." At this time, Hu Yan's voice was very low. If it weren't for Yang Chendong's good hearing, he probably wouldn't have heard what she was saying. After saying this, she had lowered her head. He didn't need to look to know how red her face was right now. Ha ha ha. After seeing the answer he was satisfied with, Yang Chendong strode forward, picked up Hu Yan, and put her on the bed. At the same time, he waved his sleeve, and all the red candles in the room were extinguished. I like Yan too. After a short sentence, a series of rustling sounds could be heard, and then the moon, which was originally hanging in the sky, was now nowhere to be seen. Soon, the entire courtyard was filled with extravagant sounds, 10,000 words omitted. Happy time always passed quickly, and the sky slowly brightened. At the embroidered uniform guard's office, seeing that the time had passed and Yang Chendong still hadn't arrived, Han Ji acted as if he had won the lottery. He quickly went to LV Gue, who was sitting there with his eyes closed. "Commander, he didn't come. It seems like he doesn't take your words seriously at all." LV Gue didn't even open his eyes after hearing this. No one knew what he was thinking. His eyeballs kept rolling. According to Han Ji's understanding of LV Gue, he was really angry at this time. It seemed that Yang Chendong wouldn't have a good time. That was the truth. LV Gue still didn't open his eyes, but the words he said made Han Ji feel very relieved. Yang Chendong didn't listen to your orders. Suspend his duties first and spread this decision to all the embroidered uniform guards. Suspension for not attending the meeting. This was LV Gue's trap for Yang Chendong. Or it could be said that he had already planned this, so when he said this, he didn't hesitate at all. Yes. Han Ji was waiting for this sentence. After he agreed, he turned around and left. He was eager to spread the news and let all the embroidered uniform guards know. In the future, he would like to see how arrogant Marquis would be in the future. The embroidered uniform guards and the East faction guards had always been the focus of the security bureau. If there was a situation here, it would be sent to the Yang family village and sent to the director Tiger's man. As for when to show it to the young master, it was up to the director to decide whether the situation was serious or not. After tossing and turning for half the night, Hu Yan fell asleep tired. She vaguely felt that someone was moving beside her. In her mind, she suddenly thought that she was no longer the young lady of the Hu family, but the daughter-in-law of the Yang family. She immediately struggled to get up. Well, baby, sleep a little more. A woman must have enough sleep. Also, there are not so many rules here. Yang Chendong's voice came to her ear. Then she felt a heat on her forehead, and their lips came in close contact. After kissing Hu Yan's forehead, Yang Chendong walked out of the bedroom with a face full of energy. After going out, he saw that Xiao Qing had already prepared the water and was waiting to serve Hu Yan. He smiled and said, "Don't disturb Yan first, let her sleep a little longer. Also, inform the cook, Yi Chioer, to immediately make a fresh nutritious breakfast and send it over when the young lady wakes up." Hearing that Yang Chendong was so concerned about her young lady, Xiaoqing's face was full of joy and she quickly agreed. Yang Chendong strode out of the inner courtyard. From afar, he saw Hu Mang waiting for him with a serious expression on his face. Seeing that Hu Mang's brows were almost knitted together, Yang Chendong approached him and asked, "What's wrong? Did something happen?" "Young master, there's a small matter. The embroidered uniform guards just sent a message saying that you didn't come to the meeting. Lu Gui and the others suspended your position in the embroidered uniform guards." Tiger's man's voice became heavier as he spoke. Obviously, he had a lot of opinions about this matter. Someone dared to make trouble for the young master. With his character, it was best to kill and teach them a good lesson. Suspended? That's fine. Since it's like this young master can have a good rest as a newlywed. Yang Chendong didn't care after hearing this. It was just a position in the embroidered uniform guards. He really didn't care about it. Moreover, something big was about to happen. Lu Gui's actions were just smashing his own foot with a rock. "Let's go for a jog." Not taking this information seriously, Yang Chendong smiled at Tiger's man and started his morning jog. Tiger's man was happy that the young master's mood wasn't affected by this. He was worried that the young master would be angered, but now it seemed that he worried too much. The young master's mind was as broad as the sea. The news that the valiant Marquis Yang Chendong's position in the embroidered uniform guards was suspended spread like a gust of wind to the ears of all the officials in the capital. Some of the older officials who believed that they had seen and experienced many things couldn't help but sigh. As expected, an official couldn't be too high profile. Just look at the commotion yesterday. Everyone in the capital knew about it. Wasn't he about to suffer retribution soon? Using this matter, who knew how many people called the younger generation of their families to teach them to endure silently, learn the way of the mean, and not stand out too much. As the main character of this matter, Yang Chendong wasn't as depressed as everyone thought. On the contrary, he was leading the 4 girls, plus 7th sister Yang Duo, out of the Yang family manor, heading straight for a place not far away that the common people called Chicken Crow Mountain. Yang Chendong wanted to bring the 5 beauties to the barbecue. For this reason, he had Yi Chioer prepare a lot of ingredients. Tiger's man, Beta Persei, Chiu V's first guard, and 3 squads of cold front members accompanied them. Everyone left the manor. It was currently autumn. The maple leaves on the mountain were golden yellow, and the scenery along the way was indescribably beautiful. The 4 girls couldn't stop shouting. Women in ancient times rarely had the opportunity to go out like this. Even if they went out, they were often very strict and weren't allowed to casually look around. How was it like being with Yang Chendong, where they could do whatever they wanted? In the spacious and comfortable carriage, lying down wasn't a problem at all. Every time they saw beautiful scenery, they would take out their only camera to record the beauty. Because of this, the caravan also stopped and traveled. In the afternoon, they finally arrived at the foot of Chicken Crow Mountain, which was 30 li away. Soon, everyone set up the grill, held the charcoal, started the fire, prepared the ingredients, and fetched water. The guards also looked around with vigilant eyes. There wasn't the slightest bit of panic, which surprised the 4 girls and made them very happy. The environment in the wilderness was the easiest for people to let their thoughts run wild. Because of this, their mood was also very good. Later on, they even followed a few maids to make skewers out of curiosity. It wasn't enough to just do it themselves, so they even pulled Yang Chendong over. Thus, the dignified marquis of the Great Ming Dynasty actually started working there with the servants. This isn't good. 7th sister Yang Duo really couldn't believe the scene in front of her. Her husband, Wang Go, used to be just an insignificant official, but he had always stayed away from the kitchen. The idea of a gentleman staying away from the kitchen was deeply rooted in people's hearts at that time. But look at Yang Chendong. Even though he had the title of marquis and owned such a large family property, he still worked with everyone. From this point alone, the biggest difference between him and the others was that Yang Chendong was different from others. There's nothing bad about it. Since we came out to play and eat, of course, the atmosphere will be better if everyone works together. Hu Yan and Yang Duo had the best relationship, and the distance between them was also the closest. Naturally, they heard the whispering just now. But Yang Duo still wanted to say something. No buts. Lu Lang didn't refuse. I think he is willing to do such a thing. As his sister, you don't have to care so much. You should hurry up and work. Don't be outdone by others. Hu Yan chuckled. After completing the experience of turning from a girl to a woman last night, her mind didn't seem to be as mature as before. At this time, she was completely like a child. If it wasn't for the torment last night, and her body didn't allow it, she would probably start jumping around in a while. Chapter 168. Yang Duo's doubts were quickly led astray by Hu Yan. In just a short while, not only did she not let her 6th brother Yang Chendong rest, she even took out a portion of the tasks in front of her and placed them in front of him. In her words, it was called, capable people do more work. When Yang Chendong was a soldier in his previous life, he did everything very quickly. Naturally, the speed at which he worked was not something these young ladies could compare to. With Yang Duo taking the lead, Hu Yan quickly placed her own skewers in front of Yang Chendong. Not only that, she also brought Xiao Yin, Lady Shui, and Lady Xiang's skewers over. Xiao Yin and the other 2 naturally did not dare to mess around like Hu Yan. They could only look at Yang Chendong with an awkward and slightly nervous expression. You guys are too much of a bully. Looking at the mountain of skewers in front of him, Yang Chendong showed a helpless expression, causing the women to laugh out loud. Even Tiger's Mane's wife, Feng and Yang Xi's wife, Mu Lily, could not help but cover their mouths and chuckle. At that moment, the 2 women were greeted by their husband's stern gaze. What the young master did with his wives was considered a pleasure in the boudoir. Outsiders were absolutely not allowed to comment on anything. Tiger's Mane and Yang Xi had been with Yang Chendong for a long time, so they naturally understood this principle. After being glared at, the 2 women curled their lips and looked as if they were not afraid. However, they turned around and busied themselves with their work. Obviously, they were not afraid of their husband, but they knew that they had to give face at the right time. This way, they could live a happy life. Looking at Yang Chendong, in the face of the work that was completely beyond one person's ability, he waved his hand and called Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and Yang Xi over. Put it on. I'll leave this work to the three of you. Ah. Young master, this. Tiger's Mane and the other two looked troubled. If they were asked to charge and break through enemy lines, they would definitely not object. However, when it came to this kind of work, the three of them were really a little embarrassed and unhappy. What is this? The young master asked you to do something, and you're still making excuses? Let me tell you, this job is going to be done by the three of you. You have to finish it. Also, spread the news to Crimson City, let them train a female army. The number doesn't need to be too big, just about 200 people will be enough. In the future, it's better to let them protect Madam. Also, it's better to let them do the delicate work. Yang Chendong sighed. He didn't want a group of men to protect his women. It would be inconvenient. It was better to prepare and train some female soldiers in advance. That's a good idea, a good idea. I've long heard from Xiao Feng that there are many girls in Crimson City who want to become soldiers, but other than entering the propaganda team, there doesn't seem to be a better opportunity. Now that we have a female army, the problem will be solved. Beta Persei laughed foolishly. Oh? What problem has been solved? Is it your marriage? Tiger's Mane laughed after hearing this. Among the few of them, Tiger's Mane and Yang Xi's personal problems had been solved. Only Beta Persei had not made any progress in this regard. It was no wonder that Tiger's Mane said this. No, no. The burly Beta Persei blushed when Tiger's Mane said this. He wanted to argue about something. However, when Yang Chendong saw this, he smiled and said, Tiger's Mane is right. Beta Persei, you're already 20 years old. It's time for you to find a wife. Work is important, marriage is also important, and carrying on the family line is even more important. Since Yang Chendong said this, Beta Persei could not refute. He could only lower his head and agree. However, anyone could see that he was really uncomfortable holding it in. He wanted to find a chance to learn from Tiger's Mane. They skewered the meat and started to roast it. The sky gradually darkened. Fortunately, Ling Feng had already prepared dry wood. He set them together and lit them up. As a result, a huge bonfire was formed. When the bonfire was lit, the flames burned fiercely. A sense of warmth instantly spread throughout everyone's body. Bonfire, the fragrance of meat, good wine, beautiful women. When all of this was put together, it formed a very beautiful picture. Very soon, other than Ling Feng who was on sentry duty and in charge of safety, everyone else, including Yang Chendong and his 4 wives, left the scene and gathered around the bonfire to dance and sing. Everyone's cheeks were red and all of them were beaming with joy. Hu Yan's left hand was held by Yang Chendong, and on her right was Yang Duo. Her hands were raised from time to time, and her legs were kicking and jumping. Her face was like a peach blossom, and she was extremely happy. This kind of life was something she had never dared to imagine before. It was so unrestrained, free, and even freewheeling. And it seemed that her future life could be accompanied by this. How could it not make people yearn for it and feel relaxed and happy? They did not know how long they had been dancing and singing. They drank a lot of wine, and under Dong Shuai's intentional or unintentional actions, Hu Yan was a little drunk. It was already very late. When everyone was tired, Hu Yan felt her body being lifted into the air. She was carried onto Yang Chendong's back and they entered a spacious and sturdy tent that had already been set up. Hu Yan knew that beautiful things like last night would happen again. Just when she was feeling shy, Yang Chendong had gone out and walked in again. This time, he was holding Qiao Yin in his arms. Ah! The sudden appearance of another woman made Hu Yan feel a burst of shyness and surprise. The joy of a boudoir was certainly something that people yearned for, but why did he bring another person out? Before Hu Yan could figure it out, Lady Xue and Lady Xiang were also carried into the tent by Yang Chendong. The other three women had already seen this kind of thing. They slept together, so of course, they knew what Dong Shuai was going to do. They were a little shy and a little excited. Hu Yan, on the other hand, was completely unaware. Just when she was wondering why there were so many people, all of a sudden, a big hand began to wander around her body. That feeling made her feel comfortable and shy. She forced herself to stay awake and said, "Lu Lang, don't do this. There are others, not others. They are all your sisters. Huh, let's do it together." Yang Chendong said very soberly. Under his skillful methods, Hu Yan was quickly turned into a pile of mud. Then, she was completely at his mercy. In her consciousness, she seemed to see a few white bodies. Then, she fainted happily. For a moment, the garden was filled with intoxicating spring. A ray of sunlight slowly shone through the tent and shone on Hu Yan's face. She felt the warmth and slowly opened her eyes. What came into view was that Xiao Yin and the other women were still sleeping. Ah! She could not help but exclaim. Her mind instantly recalled some of the things that happened last night. Since she was young, she had never been taught such words and thoughts in her education. For a moment, she could not believe that something like this would happen to her. Xiao Yin, Lady Shui, and Lady Xiang had already woken up. After all, it was not the first time they had done this. Their physical recovery was naturally much better than Hu Yan's. It was only because they did not know how to face it that they pretended to be asleep. However, after this scream, they could no longer pretend. They opened their eyes one by one and saw Hu Yan's tears flowing down the corners of her eyes. Hu Yan's crying made the other three women panic. They quickly came forward to comfort her and took the blame, saying that it was all their fault. "No. You are not wrong. It's all his fault. I can't accept this." Hu Yan didn't want to be estranged from her sisters as soon as she came here. Although she was the official wife, she had never thought about how to rely on such an identity to bully others. "Please don't blame Sir. I'm sure Big Sister doesn't know that Sir is especially good in that aspect. None of us can satisfy him." Xiao Yin hated it when people talked bad about Yang Chendong. Even if the person who spoke was Hu Yan, she was still unhappy. Yes, second sister is right. Sir is indeed very good in that aspect. It's not something we can handle alone. Lady Shui hurriedly said to Xiao Yin. Sir is working hard outside for our happiness. There are many things he needs to consider. We are just serving him. If we can't satisfy him in this aspect, then aren't we too useless? Among the women, Lady Xiang, who became Yang Chendong's woman one step ahead of Hu Yan, also expressed her attitude. They did not know when it started, or maybe it was yesterday, but they had automatically made a list. Hu Yan was Yang Chendong's first wife, so she was naturally the eldest sister. Xiao Yin had been with Yang Chendong the longest, so she was naturally the second sister. Lady Shui was the third sister, and Lady Xiang was the fourth sister. As for whether there would be a fifth sister after that, it was already set in stone. Xiao Yin had said that there was a girl named Luan Xiaoyu in their hometown who also liked Yang Chendong very much. Yang Chendong also liked her, but because she was too young, they still had to wait. If there was a fifth sister, then who knew if there would be a sixth sister and a seventh sister? However, seeing that Yang Chendong was so young and had such a big family business, it was not surprising that there would be sisters joining him. Hu Yan didn't expect that she would immediately be met with the common resistance of her three younger sisters when she said Yang Chendong's fault in a fit of pique. She quickly changed her words and said, "I don't mean to blame him. It's because things came too suddenly, and I can't accept it, so, it's normal that you can't accept it. I don't blame Big Sister for having such thoughts. However, from now on, we sisters will not forgive anyone who says anything bad about Sir. Especially Big Sister. You must set an example for us." Xiao Yin said this with a rare serious expression. In her heart, Yang Chendong was the sky, the earth, and her everything. Chapter 169. Oh, I got it. Hu Yan, who had clearly suffered a loss, was now like a child who had done something wrong. She lowered her head and pursed her lips. However, it had to be said that after such a conversation, she had diluted the matter of sleeping together. She, who had been persuaded, had also begun to consider Yang Chendong. At the foot of Chicken Crow Mountain, Yang Chendong had just returned from his morning run when he was stopped by seventh sister, Yang Duo. "What's the matter, seventh sister? Did someone bully you?" Yang Chendong pretended to be angry when he saw the anger in Yang Duo's eyes. Her eyes weren't eyes, and her nose wasn't nose. But in reality, he knew very well what seventh sister was here for and what she wanted to say. "Sixth brother, aren't you going too far? I heard that last night you..." "What happened last night? Did seventh sister not rest well? If so, go back and have a good rest now. If you want to go back to the Yang family village, I can send someone to send you back now. As for other things, let's not talk about them." Yang Chendong saw that the other party was bluntly talking about what happened last night and seemed to want to interfere in his family matters. Yang Chendong used words to block her. In the end, he still had to rely on himself to live his own life. As for other people's opinions, it was just a one-sided opinion and did not represent anything. Perhaps Yang Chendong was very easy to talk to when it did not involve matters of principle. However, when it came to some matters, his words carried enormous weight. Once he made a decision, he would not change it. Yang Chendong's tone suddenly became a little stiff. Yang Duo could not accept it for a moment. "This. Sixth brother, you've changed?" "It's not that I've changed. It's just that seventh sister has never seriously understood me." Yang Chendong shook his head and looked at Yang Duo very seriously. They were family and had a blood relationship, so he would not watch anyone bully his seventh sister. However, this was not a reason for the other party to interfere in his life. With just one sentence, Yang Duo suddenly became speechless. Yes, she really did not understand Yang Chendong. Ever since her youngest brother had appeared in the capital, she had always been surprised by his appearance. Some matters seemed reckless, but they ended with a cause and effect. Some matters seemed unsolvable, but as long as sixth brother made a move, he would always be able to grasp the crux of the matter, and solve it in one step. As a woman, she was only judging from her own point of view. But was her point of view really correct? Even Hu Yan, as the mistress of the house, did not express any doubts. What reason and authority did he have to say anything? "I'm sorry, sixth brother. I'm thinking too much. I think I should go back to the tent and have a good rest." Yang Duo suddenly felt that her behavior was a bit reckless. For a moment, she wanted to find a quiet place to think about it. After saying this, Yang Duo turned around and left. This time, Yang Chendong didn't stop him. He knew that there were some things that he had to figure out himself. Seventh sister, who had already experienced a failed marriage, was most afraid of being hurt in this aspect. Speaking of which, she reminded her out of kindness. However, Yang Duo forgot one thing. Yang Chendong was not Wang Go. After Yang Duo left, Yang Chendong strode back into the tent. After what had happened to seventh sister, he was even prepared to be scolded by Hu Yan. This was his woman, and he should love her. No matter what Hu Yan said, he was prepared to not talk back. When he entered the tent, Xiao Yin and the other two girls had already left. Only the maid Xiao Qing was there to dress Hu Yan. When she saw Yang Chendong enter, Xiao Qing quickly bowed and said, "Master. How about this? You can leave for a moment. I have something to discuss with madam." Yang Chendong smiled and nodded to Xiao Qing. Xiao Qing naturally knew that she would spend the rest of her life with Hu Yan and Yang Chendong. How could she dare to refuse such a small request? She agreed and immediately left. When only the two of them were left in the tent, Yan lowered her head with a blush. Yan was shy. After all, she and her 3 sisters served Yang Chendong last night. It was a shameful thing. She couldn't adapt for a while and couldn't face it. However, when Yang Chendong saw this scene, he thought that she was angry at him. He hurriedly squatted down and said, Yan, it's my fault. I didn't consider your feelings. I was too agitated, so, no. His mouth was suddenly blocked by Yan's small hand. Lulang, don't say that. As your wife, I didn't consider your feelings. Last night, I was willing. The more she spoke, the lower her head. In the end, her head was about to plunge into Yang Chendong's arms. He didn't expect such a result. For a moment, Yang Chendong was overjoyed. Really? Yan, you're the best. I love you so much. In ancient times, the word love was not so easily spoken. Even when husband and wife spoke words of love, they rarely used the word love. However, when Yang Chendong said the word love, Yan was overjoyed. She felt that she had made the right decision by listening to Qiao Yin and the others. In her happiness, she said happily, Lulang, I didn't understand you before. You were too tired. As your wife, as long as you're happy, you can do whatever you want in the future. Yang Chendong had already thought it through. It must be Qiao Yin and the others who did Yan's work that resulted in such a delicious result. He was instantly even more satisfied with Qiao Yin and the others. Originally, he had to spend a lot of effort to persuade them. Unexpectedly, he didn't need to say anything and the matter was resolved. In his happiness, Yang Chendong held Yan's little face and kissed it. With this kiss, Yan felt her entire body go soft. She said shyly and carefully, Husband, if you want to, can you wait until night time? After all, it's broad daylight. If others find out, I'm afraid it won't be good. Seeing that Yan seemed to be a little moved, Yang Chendong laughed. However, he also knew that Yan's skin was probably very thin. At least, it wasn't as thick as his. If he didn't let go of this matter, it was very likely that it would cause resentment. Therefore, he intentionally changed the topic. First, he talked about the matter between Shaoqing and Sun Chuang. They're not young anymore. As their master, you should find a time to arrange their marriage. We'll take care of all the expenses. In short, you can't treat Shaoqing unfairly. After all, she's been with you for so many years, hasn't she? Thank you, 6th young master. Seeing that Yang Chendong had considered the matter so carefully, Yan was very moved and said, We're husbands. In the future, there's no need to say thanks. Everything I do for you is what I should do. By the way, my 7th sister seems to have some complaints about what happened last night. Do you think you should personally go and have a good talk with her? I don't want her to misunderstand me, hee. Yang Chendong thought about it and decided to leave the job of persuading 7th sister to Yan. If Yan took the initiative to persuade her, it would be more effective than 100 words from him. Hearing that 7th sister had complaints, Yan's heart was moved. This was 7th sister standing up for her. She didn't even hesitate to blame her own brother. This sister-in-law was absolutely competent. Yan agreed, and Yang Chendong's heart was completely relieved. Although there were some things that he didn't ask others to understand, they were still family, and understanding was always better than opposing. Just as Yang Chendong was enjoying the happiness of having multiple wives and gaining the understanding of his wife, several groups of fast horses were galloping through the streets of the capital. These brave soldiers had banners with the word Xian written on their backs. As soon as they entered the capital, their faces were gloomy as they spurred their horses forward. Many scheming people had a bad premonition when the messenger didn't shout the news of victory from 600 miles away. This should be a battle report from the front line. If it wasn't a victory report, what could it be? At this time, in the imperial court, Zhu Qiyu had already changed into a dragon robe and was sitting on a huge golden dragon throne. He was looking at the officials and listening to them report on the important matters of the court. Zhu Qiyu, who had been emperor for some time, had gradually come to like this feeling of being high and mighty. Although he didn't have complete power and had the final say, he had basically controlled the situation. Out of the 6 ministries, 2 of the ministers had been replaced by his favored candidates, Minister of Revenue Jin Lian and Minister of War Yi Ming. These 2 had replaced Wang Zhua and Kuang Yi, who had followed Emperor Ying to Nanjing. These 2 new ministers were very grateful to Zhu Qiyu for his favor. Naturally, if this substitute emperor had any requests, they would do their best to satisfy them. Of the 6 ministries, the Minister of Works, Shi Pu, had always been a fence-sitter. When Wang Zhen had been present, he had often tried to curry favor with him. Now that Jining had become a head eunuch, he had long since leaned over. In this way, he could also be considered a member of the substitute emperor's faction. Out of the 6 divisions, 3 of them were on her side. Zhu Qiyu felt even more satisfied. Zhu Qiyu had come to court in a happy mood, intending to show off his skills and compete with Zhu Qizhen in governing the country. However, all of this ambition was shattered when a messenger ran into the imperial court to deliver an urgent military report. Report: important military intelligence from the front line. As soon as the messenger entered the main hall, he knelt on the ground with a thud. It could be seen that he had been running non-stop all this time, so much so that he was a little exhausted. Speak. Hearing that it was a military report from the front line, Zhu Qiyu straightened his body and looked at the soldier with a face full of expectation. Your Majesty, Admiral Shi Heng was ambushed by Walla's army. The army suffered heavy losses, but Admiral broke out of the encirclement and is resisting the enemy cavalry's advance. Please let me report this to Your Majesty first and ask for reinforcements to be sent. Prepare for a big battle. After the messenger finished speaking in one breath, he felt his vision blur and then fainted from exhaustion. Chapter 170. Quickly, carry him away and treat him. Jining stood at Zhu Qiyu's side, looking at the unconscious soldiers as she spoke to the Huban soldiers outside the imperial court. After saying this, she felt a shadow flicker at her side. Who else could it be but Dai Zong? Just as Zhu Qiyu was about to show off his skills and become a famous monarch to unify the world, he suddenly heard that the front line had been defeated. At this moment, how could he still remain calm? His expression changed greatly, so much so that his body became a little shaky. Dear ministers, how many troops can we mobilize now? Zhu Qiyu forced himself to stay alert upon hearing this report, and he turned his eyes to the new Minister of War, Yi Ming, hoping that he could give a satisfactory result. Yi Ming, courtesy name Zixin, was the son of Yizhi, a man of high intelligence. After ascending the throne, Dai Zong had sought the favor of the Minister of Rights and was promoted to Minister of War. He was an official who had been promoted on the front lines. When he first arrived at the Bureau of Military Personnel, his seniority was still shallow, so he did not have complete control over the Bureau of Military Personnel. Now that a problem had arisen, Yi Ming felt his head ache. But Yi Ming was still a capable person, and he quickly calmed down. After some thought, he went to the Bureau of Military Personnel and looked at the reports from the various factions and calculated a result. Your Majesty, there are currently only 5,000 soldiers in the capital. If we continue to urgently mobilize them, we should be able to mobilize another 5,000 soldiers in 3 days. In half a month, we should be able to gather an army of 50,000 soldiers. For the mighty capital of the great Ming dynasty to have so few soldiers was a result that Zhu Qiyu had not expected. But he knew that since Yi Ming dared to say this, there was no doubt about this result. If this was really the case, how should they deal with the arrival of the Walla's army? Speaking of which, there were many reasons for the current situation in the capital. Unlike in history, after the Tumu fortress incident, Dai Zong had listened to Yu Qian's words and adopted a defensive strategy. This had led to the defense of the capital and the defeat of the Walla's army. Because of Yang Chendong's arrival, Yu Qian had been invited to Tsuxian city long ago to serve him. With the idea gone, Shi Heng took command of the army and sent out the majority of the soldiers in and around the capital. Moreover, Zhu Qizhen had declared himself emperor in Nanjing and taken away a portion of his soldiers, leaving the capital suddenly empty of soldiers. Naturally, they were helpless against Walla's army. At this moment, not only Zhu Qiyu, but the other officials were also staring at each other, unable to find a better idea. As the saying goes, even the cleverest housewife cannot cook without rice. Without sufficient military strength, how can one fight a war? Can one rely on words? If they could win with their mouths, there would be no need for the country to support a large number of troops. Among the ministers, Su Yozhen's eyes kept darting around. Relying on his relationship with Yang Chendong, he was promoted again. He was no longer a part of the imperial censor, but went to Taichung Temple to become a Shaoqing. He was in charge of the country's sacrificial ceremonies and was a fourth-grade official. The reason why he was promoted so quickly was naturally because Yang Chendong had helped him with a lot of money. It was also because the original Shaoqing of Taichung Temple, Huang Yangzheng, went to Nanjing with Ingzong, so there was a vacancy. As a fourth-grade official, Su Yozhen already had a stage to display his ambitions. At this moment, when he saw the emperor and the other ministers' difficult expressions, he really wanted to stand up and propose to move the capital to the south. After all, a gentleman would not stand under a dangerous wall. In fact, in history, Su Yozhen was the main official who proposed this idea. But now, this idea just flashed in his mind. It was not for anything else, but because Ingzong had already gone to Nanjing. At this time, what would they mean by going there? It was likely that an internal conflict would be inevitable. And Zhu Qiyu, who was leading the defeated army, really did not know what the chances of winning were. Unable to bring up the matter of moving the capital to the south, Su Yozhen's eyes darted around as he thought of another feasible idea. At this moment, when the other ministers were still thinking about what to do, he had already taken out his ceremonial tablet. He stepped forward and said, "I have something to report." "Minister Su, quickly say it." Seeing that everyone had no idea, but one minister still had a suggestion, Zhu Qiyu suddenly had a feeling of hope. "Your Majesty, the army at the front has suddenly lost, and the capital is in danger. At this time, the first thing to do is to mobilize the troops near the capital to save the emperor. The second thing to do is to choose a general who can lead the army to block the enemy outside the city wall. This will ensure the stability of the great Ming dynasty." "That's right, mobilizing the troops after, choosing the general before." Zhu Qiyu felt that it was very reasonable. He immediately said to the Minister of War, "Yiming, Minister Yi, you can send a letter to mobilize the troops near the capital to protect the capital." "Yes, Your Majesty." Yiming replied and then left the court with his ceremonial tablet. "Good, now everyone, who can lead the army to fight against the Walla army?" Zhu Qiyu's eyes swept across the ministers in the court. The desire in his eyes was very obvious. However, when he asked this question, the entire court fell silent. First, the Tumu Fort's army of 500,000 suffered a crushing defeat, and then General Shi Heng's army of 150,000 was also defeated. Right now, there were only a few thousand men left in the imperial court. Even if they waited for 3 days, their military strength would still be no more than 10,000. How could they resist the elite Walla cavalry? The Walla cavalry could defeat the great Ming army again and again. At this moment, the ministers' faces changed at the mention of this tiger. The crowd of officials didn't speak. This made Zhu Qiyu extremely anxious. "What's wrong?" Our magnificent great Ming dynasty actually has a great general who can command the three armies? Valuing the civil and despising the military had always been the basic national policy of the Ming dynasty. In fact, it was not only the Ming dynasty. It was the same from the earliest Han dynasty to the Tang dynasty and the Song dynasty. After all, the military was strong and the civil was weak, which was not good for the stability of the country. In the Ming dynasty, this situation was even more obvious. Normally, when the military met the civil officials, it was very rare for the military to be able to straighten their backs. It was just like Shisheng in the past. However, a Jianghu of the Brocade Guard could bully a famous general, Jianghu, and invade his land. It was no wonder that when Zhu Qiyu asked this question, the civil officials and the military officials did not speak. Is there really no brave general who dares to face the Walla army? Zhu Qiyu asked loudly in anger. At this moment, he really wanted to roar, "If none of you go, do you want us to personally lead the army?" However, when he thought of his elder brother Zhu Qizhen's end, this thought quickly disappeared without a trace. He did not want to be the second emperor who lost an army. What if he was captured by the enemy when the time came? What should he do? Zhu Qiyu's face was full of anger. He criticized the officials that he usually raised for being useless. Jining saw that the situation in the court had worsened and reminded him in a low voice, "Your Majesty, this matter needs to be discussed at length. It is better to dismiss the court first and wait until tomorrow morning to make a decision." The courtiers were not completely loyal to him. The most important thing was that there was still Zhu Qizhen in Nanjing for everyone to rely on. Even if he really got angry here, not only would it be useless, it was likely to lead to a backlash from the courtiers. If they collectively left, then his position as the emperor would come to an end. Forget it, forget it. Everyone, go back and think about it carefully. Wait until tomorrow morning. No matter what, you must choose a candidate. Dismiss the court. Zhu Qiyu was very helpless. Although he had become the emperor, this emperor did not seem to be as powerful as the previous Ming dynasty emperors. After the officials shouted "Long live the emperor," they left the court and left the palace. After Su Yozhen left the palace hall, she quickly contacted the people of the security bureau and reported the situation in the court today. At this time, Yang Chendong had already returned to the Yang family manor from the foot of Ji Ming Mountain with the women. Originally, the women wanted to play for a few more days, but tomorrow was the time for Hu Yen to return home. This was an important matter for the first madam, so Yang Chendong naturally had to take care of it. He returned to the Yang family manor in advance to make preparations. On the way back, the people of the security bureau came over and reported everything that happened in the court. The group had stopped. Yang Chendong stood on the side of the road and listened to the report of the staff of the security bureau. In the carriage, Qiao Yin looked at this scene through the curtain and couldn't help but say, "Sir is busy with important matters again. Unfortunately, we can't help much. The only thing we can do is to make him happy when he sees us. Don't make him angry and satisfy all his requests." "You're right, second sister." Lady Xue and Lady Xiang hurriedly agreed. Looking at Hu Yen, although she didn't say anything at this time, from her concerned eyes, it could be seen that she had accepted the fact that she slept with him. Even if the other women could understand Yang Chendong, as the wife, why couldn't she understand? On the side of the road, after carefully listening to what happened in the court, Yang Chendong sighed. Although the wheel of history had changed because of his appearance, the defense of the capital still had to start as scheduled. Since history had changed, Yang Chendong couldn't accurately predict what would happen, and naturally couldn't make plans in advance. But since the emperor asked to recommend a general to lead the army, he was somewhat interested. First, this was a good opportunity for him to show his talent. Second, it was a good opportunity to consolidate his strength and expand his influence. Third, and most importantly, Yang Chendong would never allow the other races to have any ideas about the Han people and cause any destruction. Back then, Kuang Yi and Wang Zue, the 2 ministers of the 6 ministries, wrote to him, saying that he had saved Ingzong's life, and that he would have more room to develop in Nanjing than in the capital. The environment would also be better. But Yang Chendong still refused. That was because there was a strong enemy in the capital, while Nanjing was very safe. Chapter 171. It couldn't be said that Yang Chendong had appeared for the sake of war, but he had indeed appeared for the sake of the Han's rise to power. Since there were people who wanted to harm the Han, why couldn't he teach them a lesson? Presumably, after this battle, Zhu Qiyu would owe him a big favor. This would only be beneficial to his future plans. Alright, Marquis knows about this matter. How about this? Go back and tell Su Yozhen to recommend Marquis to lead the army tomorrow morning. Yang Chendong analyzed the situation and felt that the time was right. It was time to step forward, so he informed his subordinates of his decision. Yes. The staff member of the Security Bureau quickly left after receiving a confirmation. Yang Chendong quickly returned to the spacious carriage. As soon as he entered, the women began to chatter incessantly. Knowing that there were some things that couldn't be hidden, Yang Chendong maintained a smile on his face as he said, "The soldiers on the front lines have been defeated. The Walla army should be arriving at the capital soon." Ah! The women had only asked out of curiosity. Even if Yang Chendong hadn't said anything, they would have understood. After all, the idea of a male protagonist had been passed down for thousands of years. But unexpectedly, Yang Chendong didn't have any intention of hiding it from them. He really did tell them about it, but the result was so shocking. They're about to reach the capital? Then we. As a descendant of the Hu clan, Hu Yen was naturally more sensitive to political matters than the other women. You don't need to worry. With sixth brother here, no one in this world can harm you. You just need to properly stay in the Yang clan manner. Yang Chendong spoke with an incomparably resolute voice. At this moment, Yang Chendong was so confident that the 4 women were mesmerized and unable to extricate themselves. Sensing that the 4 women weren't panicking anymore, Yang Chendong smiled and said, "All right, let's do what we need to do now. The immortal abode and realm beyond heaven need to operate normally to calm the people. If possible, if there's a property market nearby that's willing to sell at a suitable price, we can buy it. It's also time to expand our operations." To ordinary people, war was naturally a disaster. But to some people, it was filled with countless business opportunities. Everything depended on your position, what kind of information you could obtain, and what kind of authority you held. Yang Chendong didn't lack any of these 3 things. If he couldn't maximize his benefits in this situation, then all his previous preparations and plans would be meaningless. Buy. This was the first order Yang Chendong gave to Hu Yen and the others, as well as the first mission of his wives. For the sake of making the best of the situation, a total of 5 million taels of silver had been moved out of the cellar of the Yang clan manor. This was all prepared by Yang Chendong before the construction of the Ethwood fortress. It was all for the sake of dealing with the current situation. Tell Leng Song to pick up the pace. Be more daring. We have to reach the capital within 5 days. Yang Chendong looked at Leng Feng and his brothers, who were carrying so much silver that their hands were about to go limp. Even though he was giving orders to Tiger's Mane, he was thinking of another problem. If moving silver was so troublesome, it seemed like it was time to consider the issue of banknotes. The appearance of banknotes was a huge step forward in the history of currency. Some people in the world of currency believed that the origin of banknotes in China could be traced back to the white deer skin coin of Emperor Wu's time and the flying money of the Tang Dynasty. The flying money was actually just a currency exchange business. It did not enter into circulation and did not function as a currency, so it was not a true banknote. The banknotes of Sichuan and Chengdu during the Northern Song Dynasty were the beginning of the true banknotes. But for various reasons, the system was not perfect, and in the end, it was not developed on a large scale. In the Yuan dynasty and Ming dynasty, although the banknote system was further improved, it was still difficult for it to be accepted by the people. At the end of the Qing dynasty, the Qing dynasty's economy was in trouble, and the treasury was empty. In order to raise money for the military, they had to change their original plan of not printing banknotes for 200 years. In the third year of Xianfeng, 1853, the first banknote of the Ministry of Revenue was printed. This time, the banknotes of the Ministry of Revenue were divided into 5 types of silver: 1 tael, 3 taels, 5 taels, 10 taels, and 50 taels. In the middle of the banknotes were written in both Manchu and Chinese characters, Ministry of Revenue official banknote. It was from then on that banknotes became one of the paper currencies that could be circulated. Although the Ming dynasty also had official banknotes, most of them were internal transactions between officials. Ordinary people and even merchants rarely participated in them. The imperfection of the system meant that these banknotes could be turned into waste paper at any time. Who would dare to use silver to exchange for them? Not to mention other people, but even Yang Chendong himself did not trust the Ming dynasty government. This government was made up of officials, and the speed at which it changed was so fast that it made one's eyes blur. Who would dare to take out all of their wealth to exchange for banknotes? Perhaps the moment one exchanged for it, the Genie guards and the East faction guards would come to raid one's home. For example, Yang Chendong's 5 million taels of silver had never been exposed. He believed that if he really trusted the great Ming dynasty, Wang Zhen would have already made a move on him and would not have waited until it had developed to such a scale. It was because the banknote system was not recognized by many that Yang Chendong wanted to do something about it. In his later life, he had seen the power of the state-owned banks, so he could naturally see the huge benefits involved. As for the risks, with the Yangtze's new army as his backing, he was not afraid of others plotting against him. Perhaps he was still thinking that if others had such thoughts, he would have a good reason to deal with them. While Yang Chendong was still thinking about his grand plans, the capital was already in chaos. As the officials returned home from the court, the news of the Ming dynasty's defeat spread like wildfire. For a time, all sorts of things were said, and in a state of panic, a small number of people left the capital and headed south. Although there were not many of them, most of them were merchants. They had all left in fear after hearing that the Ming dynasty's army was defeated and that the Walla was about to arrive at the capital. When these people left, most of them took with them a large amount of cash from their homes. Perhaps it was said that merchants valued profits, and patriotism was not as reliable as profits. The departure of a portion of merchants caused the already tense atmosphere in the capital to become even more chaotic. Even some of the common people began to pack up. After 2 consecutive defeats and the loss of the Ming dynasty's elites, they did not have much confidence that they could defeat the Walla. If they did not leave, they would most likely meet with misfortune. Not to mention, in the afternoon of that day, there was a rumor that the Walla cavalry drank human blood and ate human flesh to survive. Once captured, the women would naturally be humiliated, and the men and children would become food in their mouths. This news was far more effective than people saying that the Walla cavalry was brave and good in battle. The direct result was that a large number of people gathered at the city gate. If it was not for the city gate being closed at the time, who knew how many people would have left? The so-called news of the Walla eating humans was naturally released by the Security Bureau in order to attract big hoodlums and fish in troubled waters. However, this action seemed to be a little too big. At that time, the common people were not well informed and their knowledge was limited. Thus, they really believed the rumors, and in a short period of time, a wave of people left the city. The situation at the city gate quickly spread to the palace and into the ears of the acting patriarch, Zhu Qiyu. When he heard that his people were so panicked, the new emperor was scared out of his wits. If the capital became an empty city, how could it resist the Walla army? Could it be that he, the new emperor, was going to abandon the city and flee? If that was the case, where could he go? Zhu Qizhan of the Ying sect was probably waiting for him to make a fool of himself. Go and find out who spread the rumors. After we catch them, we will cut them into pieces. Zhu Qiyu's eyes seemed to spit fire as he spoke. Your Majesty, the embroidered uniform guards and the Eastern Depot will naturally investigate this matter. However, what is more important is how to pacify the people in the city. If these people really do leave the capital, then... Jining, who had been urgently summoned, did not elaborate on what would happen. But one could imagine that if the capital became empty, the emperor would truly be a loner. In that case, this emperor would have undoubtedly failed. No. We can't let them leave. Beloved subject, do you have a good plan? Zhu Qiyu naturally understood the severity of the situation if things continued to develop like this, so he urgently asked Jining if he had any good ideas. Your Majesty, this subject is incompetent and does not have a better plan for now. However, in order to prevent the situation from spiraling out of control, this subject suggests that we temporarily close the city gates and allow only small towns to enter and exit. Moreover, we must conduct inspections and forbid the common people from taking money out of the city. In this way, the family property will naturally remain here and will not leave. As for how to deal with the Walla's soldiers, Your Majesty must preside over tomorrow's morning court and discuss with the other officials a plan. Jining had never seen anything like this before. Although he had followed several emperors and seen their ability to govern, this was mostly a power struggle between the emperor and the court officials. This was the first time he had ever seen an army pressing down on the capital. Zhu Qiyu was somewhat panicked, but he felt that Jin Ying's words were somewhat reasonable. He immediately agreed and placed all his hopes on tomorrow's morning court. After a sleepless night, the morning court began as scheduled. At the same time, the main gates of the capital were opened to side gates in the name of preventing Walla spies from sneaking in. Strict inspections were also carried out, and if anyone was found to be leaving the capital with large amounts of money, they would be arrested on the spot for all sorts of unnecessary crimes. Although this method was somewhat forceful, it truly did prevent the common people from leaving the capital. Chapter 172. It was under such a tense atmosphere that Yang Chendong entered the capital from the Yang family manor. It was the day of the return trip. He came to the Hu mansion with his new wife, Hu Yan, to visit his relatives. The inspection for leaving the city was very strict, but for entering the city, it was much more relaxed. This point was tantamount to slapping himself in the face, proving how ridiculous the so-called catching spies was. Since Yang Chendong became marquis, the lineup when he went out had become much larger. It was the same this time. The number of servants and guards alone had reached 30, and there were nearly 100 strong men and maids carrying boxes. From this point of view, Yang Chendong had already violated the rules. According to the law of the Great Ming Dynasty, a marquis could only take 8 attendants at most when he went out, but he had 30 guards. Even if he took more than 100 strong men and maids with him, the team was indeed too large. If it was in normal times, those imperial censors would probably impeach him again. But now, the capital was in danger. Who was in the mood to worry about this? Of course, even in peacetime, Yang Chendong would not change what he had decided. He came to create rules, not to follow them. Besides, in order to marry Hu Yan, Yang Chendong had given Hu family at least 2 million things, which had once shocked the capital. But in the end, those were filial gifts from Yang Chendong, but this time, Hu Yan was filial to her parents. The meaning was naturally different. Of course, Hu Yan would feel proud and happy that so many good things were given to her family. But after all, she was already a member of the Yang family. Out of consideration for her husband, she still said the words of refusal. In this regard, Yang Chendong reached out to scratch her nose and said with a smile, "Silly girl, you are my woman now. So what if I give you some things? Besides, your 6th son has nothing but a lot of money. Don't worry. After these things are given out, your sixth son will not become poor. This little joke made Hu Yan inexplicably happy, and her nose was a little sore. Although money might not be able to prove anything, wouldn't taking care of his face and being forthright and magnanimous prove his importance? Thinking of this, she sighed that she had married the right person and chosen the right man. The vast army entered the capital. If it were any other time, such a scene would definitely attract a lot of onlookers, and even a lot of discussions and gossip. At the same time, it would also garner a lot of envious gazes. But at this time, everyone was thinking about how to leave the capital to take refuge. Who would have the time to care about such trivial matters and watch such a show? Seated in the spacious and luxurious carriage, Yang Chendong would occasionally look out the window, gathering all the information in his mind and gaining a more direct understanding of the situation in the capital. Hu Yan nestled in Yang Chendong's arms. It was rare that there was no one else in the carriage, so she became somewhat unrestrained. She completely disregarded her reserved appearance and leaned her head against Yang Chendong's chest, feeling the strong and powerful heartbeat with a face full of happiness. When the carriage stopped in front of the Hu estate and Hu Yan got off, her face was still flushed with happiness. When she saw her mother waiting in the hall, she excitedly ran over. In the imperial court, the atmosphere today was exceptionally tense. In the past, in order to express his majesty, the emperor would first listen to the memorials of his subordinates, and then give a few suggestions when he had an idea, demonstrating his supreme authority. But today, before the officials could speak, even after they had just knelt down and chanted, "Long live the Emperor," he asked anxiously, "Dear officials, do you have any ideas about the candidate to lead the army and the strategy to retreat the enemy? Do you all have any ideas?" Thus, the entire court fell silent. If one were to say that a great Confucian scholar who knew the 4 books and 5 classics, he could naturally name many people. But when it came to driving back the enemy and leading the army, how could it be so easy? Speaking of which, it had been a long time since there had been a major foreign war. Even if there were some wars, they were only small skirmishes or internal conflicts. For those kinds of battles, as long as the enemy was pressured, there was no need for any techniques. But this time, facing the elite cavalry of Walla who had repeatedly defeated them, hundreds of thousands of troops were thrown in twice, and the result was a great defeat, which led to a situation where there was a shortage of soldiers. So, how could they resist the enemy? Not to mention that recommending a candidate to be an official and a general were 2 completely different things. When recommending an official, even if the other party was not qualified, they could casually find a reason and say that they did not know the official very well to get away with it. At most, they could bribe the officials and use some money, and the matter would be resolved as a small matter. But recommending a general to fight against the powerful army of Walla, if they did not do well, they would lose their heads, and even worse, the recommender would also be punished. So, who would do such a recommendation easily? On one hand, they did not want to cause trouble, but more importantly, they did not have a suitable candidate in mind. In their eyes, the Tile army that even Ing Zong himself could not defeat was already an undefeatable army, an army that no one could defeat. The officials were all mute and did not make a sound. This made the emperor anxious, and Zhu Qiyu angry. What? You don't even have a suitable candidate? You claim to be the pillars of the country, and according to you, you have everything in the world in your hands, and you are omnipotent, but now, is it so difficult to recommend a person to lead the army? Ah! If that's the case, are you lying to me? In anger, Zhu Qiyu wanted to label the officials as deceiving the emperor. In this way, even if he used this reason to kill a few officials, the others would not be able to say anything. Feeling the anger of the emperor, the officials were panicking, and at the same time, they looked at each other, and then quickly transitioned in their minds to a candidate to lead the army. But no matter how hard they thought, it was difficult to find a suitable person. What? Seeing that the officials still did not say a word, in anger, Zhu Qiyu decided to kill a few people as a sacrifice to the flag. Some people were like this. If they were not forced to this point, they would not know how powerful they were. Just as Zhu Qixian's gaze swept over and was thinking about who to kill to make an example, someone in the crowd suddenly said, "Emperor, this official has a candidate to recommend." "Oh? Who? Who are you recommending? Come forward." Zhu Qiyu, who was about to explode, suddenly saw hope, and was naturally very happy. His eyes searched, and his voice became very anxious. "As you wish." The newly appointed vice minister of Taichung Temple, Su Yozhen, who had received the emperor's order, stepped forward with a face full of confidence. The officials were also curious about who stepped forward at this time, but when they saw that it was Su Yozhen, who was in charge of the sacrifice, they all showed a puzzled expression. This person used to be an imperial censor, although he had impeached some people, and had a slight reputation, but in the end, he was not a ranked official, and it was difficult for him to enter the eyes of others. If it were not for the two emperors this time, it would be impossible for him to be promoted from a 6th-rank official to a 4th-rank vice minister of Taichung Temple. Yesterday, this person had been in the limelight once, and at that time, his colleagues had a whole new level of respect for him. They did not expect that he would speak again today. Could it be that he really had a suitable candidate in mind to lead the army? Could it be that he was really a person with a military strategy? Under the gaze of the officials, under the eager eyes of the emperor, Su Yozhen, who was holding the ceremonial tablet, stepped forward with a face full of confidence, knelt and said, "This official recommends a person. He has fought with the Walla cavalry, and has not been defeated, and retreated unscathed. With him, the so-called small foreign tribes are not a problem, and can be swept away like a spider web in a room." Su Yozhen's flattery made the ministers in the imperial court even more surprised. Who had fought with the Walla army and not been defeated? Even Shiheng, who was given the title of Taidu and Wuqing Count, was also defeated. Could it be that there was really a general more powerful than this person? If it was true, why hadn't they heard of it? The officials were puzzled, but the emperor, Zhu Qiyu, did not think much about it. Right now, he was anxious to find a way to solve the problem, as long as he could force the enemy to retreat. As for where he came from and what his current position was, he did not care about it. Good, my great Ming is really full of talents, but I don't know the name of this person. Where is he now? What is his official position? Zhu Qiyu asked anxiously, but Su Yozhen answered indifferently, replying to the emperor, "This person is now in the capital, Yangchendong, the loyal marquis." Su Shaoqing, be careful with your words. Among the officials, someone quickly made a reproachful attitude. This person was an important official in the court, the Minister of Rights, Hu Shao. Yangchendong married his granddaughter, and the two families had a very close relationship. Now that someone recommended his grandson-in-law to lead the army to war, of course, he would be unhappy. This was war, and people would die, not doing business. At worst, it would just be a loss of money. That's right, Su Shaoqing, don't be too impatient. This is leading the army to war, a matter of national importance, not a place to settle personal grudges. Hu Zhangning also stood in the court. In order to solve the crisis, Zhu Qiyu had specially ordered all the 5th-rank officials in the capital to come to court. As the imperial guardian of the embroidered uniform guard, he naturally had the qualifications to stand here. He was already Yangchendong's father-in-law, so he naturally could not ignore his son-in-law's matters. His words directly pointed out that there was a problem with Su Yozhen's motives. In fact, most people in the court remembered that when Su Yozhen was still an imperial censor, he had once impeached Yangchendong for going to the red light district. After that, although Yangchendong was unharmed, he was promoted. With this precedent as an example, it was no wonder that Hu Zhangning would think this way and even dare to point it out in front of the court. Su Yozhen, who was being rebuked by both Hu Shao and Hu Zhangning, did not panic in the slightest. On the contrary, he maintained a slight smile and said, "Yes, when this official was an imperial censor, I truly did impeach the loyal marquis, but that was only out of duty, not because of personal grudges." Now, this official is recommending the loyal marquis both out of duty and to repay the emperor's kindness in recognizing my worth. Moreover, this official can take responsibility for his words. If the loyal marquis is unable to stop the enemy outside the capital, this official is willing to take full responsibility. Chapter 173. Take full responsibility. When he said this, the entire court was in an uproar. This was no longer a recommendation, but a bet on his own life. If he didn't have enough confidence, how would he dare to do such a thing? For a moment, all the officials looked at each other. No one dared to doubt whether Su Yozhen had bad motives. After all, if you wanted to harm your enemy or opponent, there were many ways. But he wouldn't choose this kind of responsible statement. Wasn't that taking the initiative to jump into a sinking ship and seeking his own death? Su Yozhen's words made all the officials speechless. There was a feeling of speechlessness and they didn't know what to say. Zhu Qiyu, who saw all of this, was very happy in his heart. Regardless of whether Yang Chendong was suitable to lead the army or not, at least someone had recommended a candidate. This was a good sign. He looked at Su Yozhen with a praising gaze and said, "Good, Minister Su is loyal to the country, your heart is praiseworthy. But I don't know how you are so sure that the Marquis of Loyalty can take on this heavy responsibility. Your Majesty, please allow this official to report." After receiving Yang Chendong's reply yesterday, he also received a lot of information from the Security Bureau. After sorting it out, he also thought about what to say for half a night. Now that it was time to show off, he immediately boasted in front of Dai Zong and all the officials. From Su Yozhen's mouth, everyone knew that Yang Chendong saved Ing Zong, Kuang Yi, Wang Zhua and the other 9 officials. Only then did they know that the Marquis of Loyalty didn't rely on luck, but a mercenary army with a high price. They were using the latest firearms, which were not difficult to fire continuously. Moreover, they were extremely accurate. It was because of this army of 100 people that they were able to save the lives of Ing Zong and the others in the chaos. This was the reason why they were given the title of Count of Loyalty and Courage. After explaining the situation in detail, Su Yozhen immediately kowtowed to the ground and vowed to Zhu Qizhen, "Your Majesty, this official is willing to use my life and the dozens of people in my family as a guarantee. If we can invite the Marquis of Loyalty and the mercenary army, it isn't impossible to withdraw the elite army of the Walla. This official asks for your Majesty's decree." His voice was impassioned and powerful, reverberating throughout the entire palace. Every word and sentence passed into the ears of the emperor and the officials, but at this time, no one agreed. It was obvious that everyone was digesting what Su Yozhen had said and the information she had brought to them. Zhu Qiyu also didn't immediately make a decision. Su Yozhen's words alone were not enough to determine if Yang Chendong really had such an ability. This was a battle to protect the capital. If he made a mistake, he would lose everything he had and his life. If he lost this battle and the capital fell to the enemy, even if he killed Yang Chendong and Su Yozhen, what use would it be? He needed to think about it carefully, so he fell into deep thought. Ji Ning, who was extremely observant, saw that Zhu Qiyu hadn't spoken for a long time. She reminded him in a small voice, "Your Majesty, is it possible to withdraw from court first and discuss this matter at court tomorrow morning?" "Oh, let's end the court session." Zhu Qiyu nodded mechanically. Immediately, a drake-like voice rang out, "Court dismissed." The Hu estate. Yang Chendong had been sitting in the main hall, accompanied by the chief steward of the Hu estate. When Hu Shao and Hu Zhangning returned, the 3 of them greeted each other. "Everyone else is dismissed." Hu Shao glanced at the steward and Tiger's Mane, who had been standing by Yang Chendong's side like a javelin. The steward withdrew. Tiger's Mane also withdrew after receiving a signal from Yang Chendong. When only the 3 of them were left in the room, Hu Shao took the initiative to speak. "Loyal Marquis, do you know that someone recommended you to lead the army in the battle against the Walla? Hu Shao asked directly, his sharp gaze piercing straight into Yang Chendong's heart. It was unimaginable that an old man in his 70s had so much experience in dealing with the world and pleasing countless people. Let alone a young man who wasn't even 20 years old. Such a gaze would make even an old official of the same court panic. Even Hu Zhangning, who was seated next to Hu Shao, felt a wave of pressure wash over him. However, towards this, Yang Chendong was neither anxious nor slow, and his expression was incomparably indifferent. It was as if these words were not directed at him. Thank you for your concern, old master. Chendong is truly guilty. Calling Hu Shao Old Master was not a common title at the time. This form of address caused Hu Shao's expression to freeze. His sharp gaze and stern expression seemed to have faded a lot at this moment. Hu Shao's aura was no longer overbearing. Yang Chendong spread out his hands and spoke with a sincere expression. Old Master, father-in-law has something to ask, so I naturally do not dare to hide it. Su Yozhen's intentions are my intentions. What do you mean? Yang Chendong's reply caused Hu Zhangning's expression to stiffen. He did not quite understand. On the other hand, his father, Hu Shao, quickly understood everything. His gaze was filled with obvious surprise. Su Yozhen is one of your people? When did this happen? Has she ever impeached you before? She has been one of my people since before the impeachment. Yang Chendong spoke extremely calmly, as if he was talking about something insignificant. There was not the slightest hint of pride. Controlling a rank 4 official of the imperial court was something to be proud of. However, no matter how one looked at it, he did not seem to care at all. It was as if everything was right and proper. This. Hu Zhangning finally understood. Of course, his face was filled with shock. Hu Dan was also shocked by these words. However, he had been in the imperial court for so many years after all. He quickly understood the crux of the matter. He was also incomparably shocked, but he did not show it on his face. Just by looking at his ability to maintain his composure, it was unknown how much better he was than his son. So that's how it is. It seems that this old man has worried too much. But you arranged for Su Yozhen to do this? How confident are you? Hu Shao knew that Yang Chendong was playing a very big game of chess, but he did not know exactly what he was going to do. He only knew that this grandson-in-law of his was filled with confidence. I don't dare to hide it from old master. I am 100% confident, Yang Chendong respectfully replied while inwardly praising Hu Zhao's reaction and judgment. 100%? This answer also startled Hu Shao. His eyes lit up as if he was going to re-evaluate Yang Chendong at this moment. Since ancient times, no one had dared to say that they were 100% confident in war. Even if they knew that victory was certain, they would only say that they were 99% confident. This was all because reality was unpredictable and constantly changing. This was especially true when it came to war. Often, if one did not consider everything thoroughly, it could change the entire situation. Who dared to say that they were 100% confident? Yang Chendong was so sure, without the slightest bit of impetuousness. It didn't seem like he was speaking without thinking. Didn't that mean that he really had thought about it long ago and was prepared long ago? But what was he relying on? I heard that you hired an army of 100 people. Those people have firearms that our great Ming Dynasty does not have. With them, you were able to successfully rescue Yingzong. Is this true? Hu Shao began to wonder where Yang Chendong's confidence came from. The first thing he asked was what Su Yozhen said. It is true. Yang Chendong replied in a resolute tone. I did hire an army. They also have firearms that are many times more advanced than our great Ming Dynasty. With them, they have no problem dealing with the Walla cavalry. But what? Hu Zhangning, who was listening intently, asked anxiously. It's just that the cost of hiring them is too high. Every time they complete a mission, it costs 10,000 taels per person. Moreover, it costs at least 1,000,000 taels per person. In other words, even if you only hire one person, you have to pay 1,000,000 taels of silver to hire them. Sigh, it's really a waste of money. Yang Chendong said while shaking his head, indicating that he could not bear the burden. So much? Hu Zhongning was also shocked by the high cost. 100 people cost 1,000,000 taels of silver. Didn't that mean that the money needed to hire 100 people could support an army of a few 100,000 people at the border for a year? Yes, it's that much. Moreover, it's impossible to negotiate the price. This is because I have done business with them before and have some credibility. If it were someone else, I'm afraid that even if they paid, they would not be able to hire them. Yang Chendong lowered his head and let out a long sigh. His expression showed that he could not bear the burden anymore. Admitting that Su Yozhen was one of his people was the sincerity that Yang Chendong showed to the Hu clan. Since they were all relatives, it would not be good to hide some things. If people knew about it in the future, how would they meet each other? But even if they were relatives, there were some things that could be said and some things that could not be said. For example, the mercenary army was originally his own army. He did not need to spend any money at all and they would completely obey his orders. Yang Chendong would not tell Hu Shao about this. Not only that, but he also had to pretend that it was very difficult. Only in this way would the old man speak up for him at the crucial moment. It could also be said that Yang Chendong was willing to say so much to Hu Shao because he wanted to use his mouth to persuade Zhu Qiyu and let him know that only he had the strength to reverse the situation. Only in this way could the other party come to him and he could ask for an exorbitant price. When Yang Chendong did things, he had always done things step by step. Even people like Hu Shao would often inadvertently be used by him. By the time he reacted, he would often not know whether to laugh or cry. At lunchtime, the atmosphere seemed to have returned to normal, but Hu Ming and Hu Zhongning both seemed to have a lot on their minds. Yang Chendong, on the other hand, kept sitting there with a modest smile, which made Hu Yen glare at him fiercely, but then her eyes became incomparably warm. Hu Yen did not know what Yang Chendong said to her grandfather and father, but she was sure of one thing, and that was that he would definitely not harm her family. Chapter 174. This time, Hu Yen brought back so many good things. Compared to the other married sisters, her face was full of glory, and she received many envious gazes from the crowd. And all of this was brought to her by Yang Chendong. How could she be dissatisfied? After a seemingly quiet lunch, Hu Yen bid farewell to her parents and family and left the Hu estate with Yang Chendong. After watching them leave, Hu Zhongning asked eagerly, "Father, can I send someone to investigate him?" The governor of the Brocade Guard originally had the power to investigate cases. This time, he planned to use his power to understand his son-in-law. "You can't. Zhongning, remember this. Although he is not as old as you, he is meticulous, far-sighted, and far-sighted. Even I can't compare to him. If you want to do anything, you won't be able to hide from him. If you do this, it will only hurt the relationship between the two of you. It is meaningless." Hu Chang shook his head and gave a high evaluation of Yang Chendong. Hu Zhongning didn't expect his father to think so highly of Yang Chendong. Although he was a little unconvinced, he was used to listening to his father's orders for a long time. This made him immediately dispel the idea of doing anything. "Okay, I won't do anything. But father, how will I explain this to the emperor in the morning court tomorrow?" "This. Father will have to think about it carefully." The news came too suddenly. It was so sudden that Hu Chang couldn't completely digest it, let alone think of a way to deal with it. Imperial Palace. When Zhu Qiyu saw Ji Ning appear in front of him, he immediately ignored his status as the emperor and got up. He asked anxiously, "How is it? Did you find out anything?" Replying to your majesty, this subject has sent out a lot of spies and obtained proof that the loyal Marquis really has a very elite army by his side. In order to avoid alerting the enemy and to avoid causing a misunderstanding between the two sides, our people did not come into close contact with them and did not see what the new firearms looked like. However, there is one thing that can be confirmed, and that is the existence of new firearms. This has been confirmed through some of the things that have happened. Jianghu wiped the sweat from his forehead as he answered Zhu Qiyu's question. He gave off the feeling that he had worked very hard to obtain this information in such a short time. But in reality, he had already experienced the new firearms before, so he naturally knew that everything was true. Hearing that there was indeed a new type of firearm, Zhu Qiyu saw a glimmer of hope. That's impossible. What if we make it ourselves? If it's really as powerful as you say, with such firearms, why should we be afraid of others? Human nature was greedy. After knowing the benefits of the new firearms, Zhu Qiyu started to have ideas about it. Perhaps it was because of his identity as the emperor that he had the misconception that everything under the heavens belonged to the emperor, and that all the good things under the heavens should belong to him. Jianghu had thought of this before, and she had paid a heavy price for it. She naturally knew that this path would not work. Faced with Zhu Qiyu's wishful thinking, she could only say, "Your Majesty, I'm afraid this won't be easy." "What do you mean?" Hearing that the matter was impossible, displeasure appeared on Zhu Qiyu's face. Jianghu was stared at by that stern gaze and her entire body tensed. She knew that if she did not explain the matter clearly, she was afraid that the emperor would hold a grudge against her. If she was not careful, he might even replace her and find someone more obedient to take power. Eunuchs were close officials of the emperor. Naturally, they enjoyed the benefits of being in a favorable position. This was also the main reason why they could become powerful and even have real power. At the same time, eunuchs relied on the emperor's favor. Once they lost this support, they were nothing. They would be chewed up by those officials in an instant and not even a scrap of bone would be left. Jianghu was well aware of the reasoning behind this. How could she dare to make Zhu Qiyu unhappy? Seeing the emperor's dissatisfied expression, she hurriedly explained, "Your Majesty, think about it. Those mercenaries saved Ing Zong's life on the battlefield. How could he not see the value of these people? However, they were not used by him. This shows that this matter is difficult to accomplish. As for how the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage used to convince those people, I'm afraid that we will need to investigate to find out." Jianghu had no choice but to bring up Ing Zong. Perhaps in the eyes of this new emperor, only his former imperial brother could give him some pressure. As expected. Hearing Jianghu's explanation, Zhu Qiyu's expression became much more normal. Something that even his imperial brother could not do, it seemed normal that he could not do it. The new firearms were not easy to obtain, and the mercenaries would definitely not listen to him. Zhu Qiyu had no choice but to set his sights on Yang Chendong. He had long heard of this gifted scholar, Yang Chendong, who he had even conferred the title of the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage, attracted Zhu Qiyu's attention. "Beloved official, what do you think of the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage?" Hearing the emperor's thoughts change so quickly, Jianghu was startled at first, but quickly recovered. "Your Majesty, the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage is very talented. He also has the ability to earn money. He is a rare talent. However, how is his ability to command troops? This subject does not know." Jianghu had already encountered Yang Chendong more than once. Although the two of them hadn't interacted much, he had never profited from him. If possible, he really didn't want to provoke this kind of person. However, since the emperor had asked, he still had to answer truthfully. "That's right. This person's ability to earn money is very strong. Regardless of whether it is in the immortal abode or in the realm beyond heaven, it is said that he is in existence who earns large sums of money every day. Even that unremarkable Yang Bao, I heard that he also earns quite a bit of money. This kind of person is a talent, and should be used by us. Zhu Qiyu longed for someone with the ability to help him. When he thought back to today's morning court, when all the officials had been so helpless, he thought that perhaps if Yang Chendong had been present, the situation wouldn't have been so awkward. Hearing that Zhu Qiyu wanted to put Yang Chendong in an important position, Jining lightly shook his head. Your Majesty, this subject said before that the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage is very capable of earning money. Thus, rather than calling him an official or a scholar, it would be better to call him a merchant. However, all merchants value profit over loyalty. No matter. It's good that he has a request. I'm afraid that a person has no desires. That way, we won't feel at ease using him. How about this, beloved official, immediately go see the Marquis of Loyalty and ask him about the matter of asking him to go to war. If he agrees, we will give him command of the army. Zhu Qiyu was truly decisive. He didn't doubt those he used and didn't use those he doubted. In this aspect, he was slightly better than Zhu Qizhen from Yingzong. At the very least, he wasn't so jealous. Since the emperor had given the order, Jining knew that it was useless to say anything else. He immediately nodded in agreement. This subject obeys. Soon after, just as Yang Chendong and Hu Yan returned to the Yang clan manor from the capital, Jining arrived. The current Jining was on the same level as Wang Zhen. His power was so great that few people could compare to him. His arrival naturally attracted Yang Chendong's personal welcome. Welcoming Jining was simply giving him face. As the saying went, if you're good, I'm good, everyone is good. Until he had enough soldiers to peacefully take over the Great Ming Dynasty, Yang Chendong didn't want to put on an aggressive front unless it was necessary. Yang Chendong and Jining were seated in the guest and host seats in a side hall. This had almost become a habit of Yang Chendong's. As long as it was a eunuch or a lowly person, no matter how much power they had, he would not receive them in the main hall. Those who could be received in the main hall were all people that Yang Chendong valued and admired. Jining naturally didn't know about this habit of Yang Chendong's. If he did, he would probably be burning with rage right now. Not only did he not know, but he also had a request to make. Upon seeing Yang Chendong, Jining became extremely courteous, maintaining a smile on his face. This one was too busy the last 2 days and was unable to attend the wedding of the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage. I am truly sorry. You're too kind. Eunuch Jin is accompanying His Majesty. How important is that? Marquis marrying a wife is just a small matter. Yang Chendong chuckled, appearing completely unconcerned. In truth, he hadn't even asked Jining for advice on his wedding day. There were times when Yang Chendong would accommodate others for the sake of the greater good. For example, on a wedding day like this, he truly didn't want to see someone who was neither male nor female appear in front of him. Even some of his colleagues in the brocade guard, who were true men, had come uninvited. The only ones who had truly been invited were the court officials. Jining clearly knew this, but he had purposely raised this question to express his dissatisfaction. He also wanted to use this as a pretext to suppress Yang Chendong and have him take control of the conversation. Unexpectedly, Yang Chendong didn't feel the slightest bit of guilt. He used the excuse that marrying a wife was a small matter to cover it up. He didn't even say the most basic polite words. This little test made Jining understand that the following negotiations wouldn't be too smooth. At the same time, he became more careful. The conversation changed from probing to straightforward. Marquis of Loyalty and Courage, you must already know about what happened at the morning court today. Someone has recommended you to lead the army against the Walla and raise the prestige of our country. Jining was expressing that he understood his situation. He had just made a trip to Minister Hu's residence and must have received news of such an important matter. Now, please state your position. Jining didn't have any intention of beating around the bush. When Yang Chendong heard this, he smiled. This was also good. He didn't have to probe too much and could save a lot of time. Alright, since Eunuch Jin's words are so straightforward, then Marquis will also state his position here. It's just a mere Walla army. To be honest, Marquis doesn't really care about them. I won't hide it from Eunuch Jin. Marquis has already contacted the overseas mercenary headquarters. The army they've sent to support our great Ming should be here soon. Chapter 175. What? You've already contacted them in advance? When Jining heard this news, her expression was one of extreme shock. Yes. As the ancients say, if one does not consider the future, one will have immediate worries. After witnessing the ferocity of the Walla cavalry outside the Tumu castle, this marquis already knew that it would be difficult for our great Ming Empire's army to be their opponent. Thus, he prepared for a rainy day and sent out a signal to send out reinforcements. What? Is Eunuch Jin blaming Marquis for acting on his own? There was a faint smile in Yang Chendong's eyes as he stared at Jining. It was as if he wanted to see through his inner thoughts. No, how could that be? For some reason, Jining felt a sense of pressure. He had only felt this kind of pressure not long after entering the palace, when he was serving Zhu Di. It's fine as long as you don't. In truth, it's nothing much. I presume that someone of Eunuch Jin's abilities already knows how much it costs to hire these foreign mercenaries with advanced firearms. It's naturally best if the imperial court can take out this money. Everything will be fine and the capital will have no more worries. But if there's some difficulty, Marquis can pay for it himself. But if that's the case, they probably won't participate in the operation against the Walla army. After all, it won't cost much to have them protect me and my property from leaving the capital. Marquis can still afford it. But if they go into battle, the cost is truly not something Marquis can afford. Yang Chendong, who had always been so proud of his wealth that he didn't know how to spend it, was now crying about how poor he was. Jining couldn't help but grimace at these words. This was a clear threat. If Dai Zong was unable to fork out enough money for the military expenditure, Yang Chendong would bring his men and leave the capital. Perhaps he would directly seek refuge with Zhu Qizhen, who was currently settling down in Nanjing. If this was the case, Jining didn't even dare to imagine what sort of chain reaction it would set off. He would not forget that it was precisely because of the opening of the immortal abode and heaven beyond heaven that the hearts of the people were at ease and many officials were willing to stay in the capital. Then, if he left now, would those officials who swayed according to the wind also leave with him? If the people wanted to leave, the officials would have to go with them, and the capital would truly be nothing more than an empty shell. At that time, before Walla's army could even arrive, the capital would have already fallen into chaos. This duke knows about this matter. However, this matter is of great importance. This duke still needs to report back to the emperor to make a decision. Seeing Yang Chendong draw the line, Jining knew that the initiative had changed hands. Unless she didn't want to rely on this person's strength to help, she could only fulfill the conditions to protect herself. After Jining finished speaking, she stood up and looked like she was about to leave. Eunuch Jin, please wait. Marquis hasn't finished speaking yet. The emperor and the imperial court would provide the military necessities, and Marquis would only be a middleman, which would not benefit him in any way. As the saying goes, one should not get up early when one is powerless. Here is one of Marquis' personal conditions. Oh, it's all written on this paper. I'll have to trouble Eunuch Jin to bring it back for His Majesty to see. Marquis will be waiting here for your good news. Yang Chendong was beaming with joy and contentment. At this moment, Yang Chendong was beaming with joy as he handed a piece of white paper filled with words to Jining. He was openly asking the imperial court for benefits from the emperor. How could this be the conduct of a law-abiding official? Normally, Jining would have ridiculed him, and then a large group of embroidered uniform guards and Eastern Depot agents would surround this place and arrest him. But now, he had a favor to ask. Although he was angry, he could only forcefully suppress his dissatisfaction. He even forced a smile and said, "All right, I will report the loyal Marquis' intentions to the Emperor. Don't worry." Jining reached out and took the paper full of words. Then, he strode away. He was really afraid of Yang Chendong. He was afraid that if he left at night, Yang Chendong would say something that would embarrass him. Seeing Jin Ying's back gradually disappear, Tiger's Mane, who had been standing guard beside Yang Chendong in the side hall, took half a step forward and said, "Young master, are we really going to help Dai Zong? Why don't we take advantage of this opportunity to watch him perish? That way, when we make a move at the last moment, won't we be able to reap the benefits?" Foolish. Yang Chendong, who had been smiling, suddenly had a cold expression. He looked at Tiger's Mane and said, "Have you forgotten what this young master said before? We're all Han people, so how can we protect the interests of the Han people and let them live better? That's what we need to do and consider. As for anything that harms the interests and lives of the common people, we must not do anything, understand?" Yang Chendong was suddenly angry, which gave Tiger's Mane a fright. He immediately half-knelt on the ground and said, "Young master, I was wrong. You are the director of the Security Bureau? When you have nothing to do, you should analyze the situation properly. In the future, there will be many uses for you. If your ability proves that you can't keep up, then it's time for us master and servant to part ways." Yang Chendong sighed softly and said with a tone of disappointment. When he heard that he had to leave Yang Chendong because of this, Tiger's Mane was really frightened. His expression was blank and he said in fear, "Young master, don't worry. Tiger's Mane will definitely study hard and won't make such a mistake again." While Yang Chendong was teaching Tiger's Mane a lesson, in the carriage, Jining had already opened the paper that Yang Chendong handed to her. When she saw the requirements written on it, she punched the window frame of the carriage and said angrily, "Loyal Marquis, you are really pushing your luck. Loyal Marquis, you are going too far." In the palace, after Zhu Qiyu saw the piece of paper sent by Jining, his expression changed unpredictably. In the end, he roared in anger. On the paper, Yang Chendong actually asked to open a bank of the Yang family, a business to deposit money. In other words, he wanted to build a private bank, a bank recognized by the great Ming Dynasty. Money and soldiers had always been synonymous with ruling a country. Often, when you had these 2 points, it was equivalent to having the foundation to establish a new power or even a new country. Yang Chendong's request for Zhu Qizhen to agree to open a bank was equivalent to taking food from a lion's mouth. No wonder he was so angry. "No, I absolutely cannot agree to it." Zhu Qiyu threw the paper in her hand to the ground, looking angry. Jining bent down to pick it up and carefully came to Zhu Qiyu's side. "Your Majesty, please calm down. For the sake of your health, don't be so angry." "How can I not be angry? This Yang Chendong clearly wants to loot a burning house. Does he really think that without him, we won't be able to defeat the Walla? At worst, I will personally lead the army into battle." Zhu Qiyu was so angry that he was almost roaring. It was obvious how angry he was at this moment. When Zhu Qiyu mentioned leading the army into battle, Jining somehow thought of Wang Zhen's death in the chaos of the army. She couldn't help but shiver. She quickly advised, "Your Majesty, you can't. The Walla is coming with ferocious momentum. Our army's morale and strength are lacking. This is not the right time to fight." "Not the right time? Even if I can't defeat them, do you think that Yang Chendong can defeat them? Ah. Or do you think he is stronger than me?" Zhu Qiyu was so angry that he lost his head. At this moment, he was so angry that he questioned Jining. Jining's face was filled with fear and trepidation. She knelt on the ground with a thump. "Your Majesty, you have a body of gold. You are the true dragon, the son of heaven. Naturally, there is no one more powerful than you in this world. However, that Yang Chendong didn't rely on himself. He hired mercenaries with new firearms with a large sum of money. Mercenaries? That's right. Since they can be hired with a large sum of money, why can't we? How about this, my beloved official, you think of a way to contact those mercenaries. We will also pay how much money Yang Chendong is willing to pay. I don't believe that they can't be used by us. Zhu Qiyu was ruthless. He decided to throw money at them and compete with their strength. After the great Ming Dynasty was ruled by Ren Xuanji, there was a lot of money in the national treasury. If it was a competition of wealth, how could the newly developed Yang Chendong be a match for a country? Seeing that Zhu Qizhen's eyes were almost red from anger, Jining knew that she couldn't refuse this matter. He immediately agreed and then quickly left the palace. He was very suspicious that if he continued to stay, he was afraid that if he was displeased, he would be in big trouble. When faced with an enraged emperor, it was better to stay away from him. The embroidered uniform guards and the Eastern Depot were very efficient. They had long since begun investigating who the leader of the mercenaries was. In addition, Yang Chendong hadn't tried to hide anything. Since this force had already been exposed, they had no intention of withdrawing it. Sooner or later, they would have to announce it to the world. Since that was the case, they might as well do it openly. What harm was there in letting others know? After finding out that the leader of the mercenaries was called Xiao Feng, and that he was a citizen of the great Ming Dynasty, Jining brought a few of her trusted subordinates to meet him in an unremarkable restaurant. Ever since the Immortal abode appeared in the city, the business of the other restaurants had been greatly reduced. In the past, some of the tycoons rarely patronized the restaurant, and the restaurant was barely hanging on despite the death of its owner. The restaurant they met in was in such a miserable state. She asked to reserve the entire restaurant, and even threw down 10 taels of silver. The owner readily provided the location. By the time Xiao Feng appeared, Jining had already drunk 3 cups of tea. With his current power, there were very few people who could make him wait like this. A trace of impatience appeared on his face. It wasn't until Xiao Feng appeared with 2 of Ling Feng's subordinates that a trace of joy appeared on his face. Company Commander Xiao, I'm here. Xiao Feng, who was attracted by the shouts, only casually raised his head to take a glance. He then calmly walked towards the 2nd floor. His footsteps did not have the slightest intention of speeding up because of the other people waiting. All of this was seen by the few embroidered uniform guards who had followed him. Perhaps it was because they were used to being arrogant, but when they saw someone even more arrogant than them, they were naturally unhappy. You're tuning in to the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.